What's up? What's up? This is Uptown Brown, and welcome to another episode of the Uptown After Dark podcast. I know y'all like what the F, this is not the usual setup that I have. Usually you see me in the crib with the background, but today, because we have a special episode on some different topics, and whenever I have a topic that I don't feel confident in discussing by myself, and I know I need some help, I usually try to solicit a special guest. So I have a special guest with me this evening, but we're gonna get to that in a minute. Shout out to speaking of What the F, shout out to What the F Studios. We down here at What the F Studios. But tonight we are going to talk about lust, love, and life.
Lust, life, love.
Lust, Life, Love. Excuse me. Pardon me. I apologize. Lust, Life, Love. It is a movie on polyamory, and I have the star of this lovely movie. She goes by the name of Stephanie Sellars. So let's everybody just clap it up for her real quick. So how you doing this evening, Stephanie?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
I don't thank you for being here. I've been definitely wanting for quite some time to discuss the poly lifestyle, whether it be like polyamory or polygamy, because I know they are different. And because I know they are so different and I haven't practiced any of those things myself, listen, I could give advice to people on how to have great threesomes, how to properly send nude pics. You can check all those episodes out as well. But I cannot give advice on polyamory or polygamy. So since you have this amazing movie that you guys should definitely check out, I figured, I'm happy to have you here so we can discuss it.
Great. Let's do it.
So how much of this movie is centered around you and your life and your actual experiences, or just fictional and just entertainment?
Yeah, it's definitely inspired by my life, my experience with polyamory and non-monogamy. You mentioned polygamy. That's like a Mormon.
Oh, see,
I am glad that's a Mormon practice.
Listen, I'm glad I have somebody here to correct me. See, this is why I can't do this by myself.
But it's interesting because a lot of people make that mistake. It's not unusual because the two words are very similar.
Yeah.
But polygamy is basically in the Mormon religion and some other cultures as well, when a man has multiple wives.
Got it.
But it doesn't go both ways. But in polyamory, it does. There's no gender, bias in polyamory. And so, yeah, the movie is inspired by a lot of my experience with polyamory and non-monogamy, like a time in my life when I was pretty much solo polyamorous, meaning like I had multiple partners, but they were not involved with each other, and I did not have a primary partner. None of them were primary to me, and then I met a man who was monogamous and married, and I seduced him into the world. I mean, we seduced each other. I introduced him to the lifestyle.
Similar to Daniel.
Yes. So the Daniel character is inspired by that man. Yeah, and the basic narrative of how that relationship challenged the character Veronica to think about her choices differently. It just brings up a lot of fears and questions and doubts about her chosen lifestyle and feelings that she didn't really experience before, like intense jealousy and just fear of abandonment. And so all of that stuff is very true. The details of the scenes and the characters. It's fictionalized.
I watched it intently with a very analytical mindset. I mean, the first thing that I noticed, without giving too much of the movie away, because we definitely want people to go out there and watch it, when I saw the interaction between Veronica and Daniel, the first interaction, I said, oh, he's about to fuck up his home. He is about to, because I think for essentially Veronica turned Daniel out and there was no way back for him. Right. So like I
It's
said,
like the Pandora's box
yeah,
was opened.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so we mentioned polygamy, we mentioned polyamory,
Hmm.
and one of the terms that was mentioned in the movie is ethical non-monogamy. Did I express that right?
I think that is mentioned toward the end of the film
So
for
what
sure.
what
Yeah.
is the difference?
Yeah, good question. Polyamory is technically many loves, like that's the origin of the word. I think it's a mix of Greek and Latin. Um, so the difference is that polyamory tends to involve more romantic connections, and so like having more multiple relationships that are romantic, as opposed to non-monogamy, which is more of a general term, which may involve polyamory, but it may just also be having multiple sex partners, or like swinging, or it's just the opposite of monogamy,
Okay.
essentially, and it's consensual, of course.
Yeah. So I guess the ethical part about the ethical non-monogamy concept would be because it's rooted in honesty. That's where the ethical part about it, because it's rooted
Yes,
in you are being transparent and honest with every person that you choose to engage with.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Um, so tell me about the journey that you went through during the process of making this film.
It was a very long journey, and I'm still on it because I'm doing all these interviews. But it was about, I would say, 2010 or so. I was in film school, and I got the idea for the screenplay. I wanted to make a movie about this lifestyle because it was such a part of my life, and I'd never seen a film that um, portrayed it authentically. Like usually it's from an outsider point of view, or like male gaze, or sensationalized. And so, that's when I started writing the script and went through many drafts. And then after I graduated film school, started to like develop, like find other people to collaborate with, and did the first shoot in 2017, and then did some more shooting in 2018, editing and all of that. And then it was in some festivals, and got picked up by 1091 Pictures, and that's how it got distributed on VOD platforms where you can watch it. But yeah, that's like, the technical process, like the creative process. Yeah, it was just like finding the story, obviously using my own experience, but then figuring out how to break away from my experience to make the story work
Got
better.
it. It's
Yeah.
I kind of equate that like the difference between telling the truth and telling the facts. Like you can tell the
Yes.
truth without telling the facts.
Yes.
Right.
Precisely.
So in participating in this sort of lifestyle, what do you find more challenging? Having the emotional bandwidth to deal with everything that goes along with it, or the physical bandwidth? And I don't just mean
Mm,
from like uh, a sexual standpoint. I mean physical bandwidth as far as like you have to s- share your time,
yes. Time
which could
management.
be which could be draining in itself,
Yes.
right? So, what do
Mhm.
you find more challenging?
Mm. The time management aspect, I think that's a big reason why a lot of people who like feel polyamorous, or they're open to it, they don't actually practice it, because it is such a time commitment and it takes a lot of energy to negotiate agreements, to schedule time with all the different partners, and navigating all the emotions and conflicts that come up it's hard enough in one relationship, right? I would say that's probably the hardest part, and those are like the challenges that come up in the film, in the story of these characters. But physically, okay, sexually, not really. you want to know like what other, so emotional challenges and then the physical challenges.
Yeah, because physical is
Yeah.
like sharing your time, but like
Yeah.
emotional, I mean, the the bandwidth that it has to take emotionally to just deal with
Yes.
several different personalities. Like it's hard enough for people to just get along with one person that
Yeah.
they cohabitate with,
Yeah.
right? So when you have to mentally deal with multiple personalities who maybe, I'm sure, obviously, in addition to the sexual component, right? Like
Mhm.
you're dealing with people because you may like them for different reasons. So
Mhm.
with those different personality traits come a whole new set of joys, become a whole new set of nuances that could make it difficult.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like if you have 3 people in a relationship, for instance, like a triad or throuple where they're all involved with each other, it's actually like 6 relationships because you have, you know, the relationship, let's say it's like between me and you, and then between me and the other person, and then between you and the other person, so that's 3. And then all together, no, actually, so it's 4, right? Did I do the math right?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So that's a lot. And yeah, and then and like jealousy can be triggered by the tiniest thing, right? It may not even be sexual. It could be like, well, but that's our show that we watch together. How could you watch it with her? And
like
so many
when
things.
you told Daniel why he answered his phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Speaking of which, you mentioned triad. I think that was like my favorite part of the movie when you bumped into Daniel's wife at the restaurant, and he was like,
Right.
"No, we're a triad."
Right. That's Veronica really owning her choice and feeling proud. Like now she has Daniel, as her primary partner. And
Right.
yeah.
So, how important is honesty when you are engaging in this sort of situation? And do you think there is a such thing as being too honest? Because I could imagine there might be a partner that, they kind of want to treat it like the military in the 90s. Don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, and in fact, that's the relationship that Daniel establishes with his wife.
Yeah. She said she didn't want to know.
Right. And that is a legitimate agreement. It has its pros and cons. And so it really depends on on the relationship, on the individuals. Don't ask, don't tell may work, but it may also, involve a level of deception, like that makes it feel like cheating. Because then, I mean, it depends on how much you don't want to know, right? If you don't want to know anything and your partner has a date with someone, what are they going to say? Like, I'm have a work meeting. That's a lie, so it gets tricky. And yeah.
I get it. I mean, don't ask, don't tell. Like I think I don't feel like that's deception, but it's definitely, like you said, there's limits to, just to keep the peace. It could cause deception, because you're right. Like it's like, I don't want to say I'm going out on a date, because now if I tell you I'm going out on a date, that leads to an argument that could prevent me from going on said date, because now you want to discuss it, versus me just
Right.
telling you anything like, oh yeah, I'm going to a work meeting, I'm hanging out with the fellas, and then now you've forced me to deceive you just to momentarily keep the peace.
Right. Yeah, it can get really tricky. I mean, some partners are like, I want to know all, tell me all the graphic details. And others are like, great, have a great time, I'll see you in the morning. So they just know that their partner is going to be with someone, but they don't know the details or want to know the details. So it really depends on the couple, the partnership, and like it's what you make of it.
How do you deal with, or how do you think the best way to handle jealousy in these type of situations are?
Communication. It's like expressing your feelings. Ideally, in a mature way where you're not just like being passive aggressive or lashing out and at your partner, or trying to, I don't know, like intervene in a way. So ideally just saying, hey, are you available to talk? And so I'm like, I'm experiencing jealousy, or I feel jealous that, and then having a conversation. And
I don't think, well, at least in my world, the people that I know, I don't think they're mature enough for this. Like, it takes
yeah,
an extreme level of emotional
it's really hard.
maturity.
It's extremely difficult.
Because especially like when you just mentioned like intervening, I could definitely see someone like, oh, you ain't going nowhere tonight. What are you doing? You better sit your behind right there in that car. But I'm just going out on a date. You said it was okay, and then
people tend to get controlling, and I'm not saying that I haven't done this myself. I'm like, it is really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, because honestly, it could depend. I feel like every response is subjective to the day, the time, how you feeling, what external things you might be going through. Like, it's definitely not. I think a lot of people, it's one of those things where like it sounds good in theory,
yeah,
but in real time, not so good.
Yeah. I've discovered that myself, but I feel like more polyamorous than monogamous, and so it's really about balance. And even though non-monogamy or polyamory has its own set of challenges, I'd rather have that openness than like feeling constrained in monogamy. But like that could change, maybe like be monogamous for a while and then.
Okay.
And then
so that leads me to another question. How realistic do you think monogamy is?
Yeah. Not very realistic, because look at how many people cheat. Look at how.
I say that all the time. I say,
like,
if monogamy was as easy as it is, there wouldn't be so many people out here lying, cheating, and scheming.
Yeah.
However, I think that my thought process has always been, I choose monogamy only because I care more about having a partner to share life with than I care about the ability to sleep around with whomever I want freely.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you got to think long term, right? I don't know if I was the person who chose ethical non-monogamy, how sustainable that is for the rest of my life.
Right. Like,
so at some point, it's like you got to make a decision. You know what I'm saying? Either you might make the decision to face the reality that you could potentially end up alone, or decide to conform, or you luck out and you get a partner that's open-minded and they don't care.
Yeah. I mean, it's usually not as extreme as like just having a partner, but then also just like sleeping with whoever you want.
Right.
I mean, some people do that. I think there's a term like radical, I think relationship anarchy or something, and all these terms. But like it could just be you are in a committed relationship that's mostly monogamous, but like, hey, sometimes you want to spice it up. After being with the same person for years, the sex may get a little boring, and I know your motto is life is too short
for boring sex. There you go. Let's give it up for that. See? Yeah.
Which I love.
Life is too short for boring. I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, you know, my partner always tells me that, this sounds a little bit morbid, right? But like when you look at life, it's like we're in the second half of our life, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and in that second half, that means that if you clock the average lifespan is 75, 80, that means that I got about 35, 40 more good summers left. I feel like if that's how many summers I got left, I want to have exciting stories to go along with my experiences.
Yeah.
And because of that, life is, like I said, life is too short for boring sex.
Yeah. And you can spice it up in many ways, and non-monogamy is just one way to do that. Like occasionally and going to a sex party, or occasionally, inviting someone into your bed, third person, or
I mean, plus the myth. Listen, I think sex parties are a great way to start. I have, I know there's like actual like adult clubs, and then there's like the privately curated events, right?
Mhm.
I feel like one of the myths is that it's just like people just going and it's just like a free for all, like it's like in ancient Roman times, like Caligula.
Mm,
You
mm.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which is a great watch for anybody. If you listen, great. Have you ever seen
It
Caligula?
is.
It's an
Yeah.
amazing watch.
Yeah.
But I feel like depending on you and how well you know yourself and how well you know your individual fetishes, going to a sex club or a private party without participating and just watching could be enough to add that extra element of spice you need to your relationship. Like it is not, there's no contract that says you have to participate with anyone
Right.
at the party. You could just
Mm-hmm.
go have fun. It's like watching live porn.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're in a relationship and you agree to do that with your partner, it's very important to have that conversation before you go to an event, and to establish the boundaries and agreements, so that you don't run into a big conflict.
How difficult do you find it setting boundaries with this lifestyle?
I think it's only difficult if, well, you don't really know what your own boundaries are. So that's the first step, to really do a lot of self-inquiry, to know what your needs and desires are, and then to be able to communicate them effectively, and then also be open to your partner's needs and desires, and then be able to be open to compromising a little bit, perhaps. And just like anything in a relationship, right? You have to be willing to compromise.
Compromise is difficult for some
It
people.
is. Sure, it is.
Some people, they want what they want and they want it yesterday. And
I used to hate that word compromise, and maybe there's a better word for it, because compromise, to me, sounds like a sacrifice, like I'm sacrificing something.
It is though. So my thoughts on compromise is like both parties either walk away equally upset because we both lost something, or equally happy because we both gained something. If that's not what it is, then I didn't compromise. I conformed.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe, what about honoring? Like, I'm honoring my needs, but I'm also honoring your needs.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. You know what I'm saying? It definitely removes the negative stigma that is attached to that word, right? Because you mentioned the word sacrifice. So I think, when people think of compromise, they understand that there is something that they are going to essentially have that they will not have anymore, right?
And there is definitely a compromise or sacrifice in both monogamy and polyamory. Just inherently in monogamy, you're sacrificing your sexual autonomy, your sexual freedom. And then in polyamory, you're sacrificing like a sense of security, I think. I mean, although you can have...
I mean, if you have a primary partner, shouldn't that provide a sense of security?
Yes. but then I think the polyamory can trigger more insecurity because, if you know that your partner is with someone else, you could feel insecure. It could trigger some insecurity.
Got it. So I noticed in the film there was like this undertone of men usually engage in this for the ability to just have multiple women. Like I noticed that in like the opening scene with Veronica and the married couple, and then I noticed it with Daniel when he first started to come out of his shell, interact with Maya. And then I also noticed it again with Daniel when Veronica attempted to introduce a male into the figure, and he just wasn't with it
Right.
at all.
Right. Yeah.
So do you find that that is usually how it is with this lifestyle, that men usually that's like a primary driver, right? The ability to have multiple women, but not have to cheat or be deceitful to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely a theme in the film, but I could make like a dozen other movies on this subject and they would all be different. So there are men who are in it, who are not in it just for that reason. So yeah, I didn't, the film is in 90 minutes, it can only have so many different types of polyamory represented, and I tried to put as much in there as I could fit.
I mean, I think you did a great job. Definitely
thank
entertaining.
you.
I'm probably going to watch it again.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm working on a TV series actually about this subject, so where there would be a lot of different
taking acting classes, so if you need me, I mean,
of course. I'm making a note of that. Yeah, there's just a lot more different motivations and styles of how to go about this lifestyle. Men who are, it definitely is, there's definitely a type of man who goes into it like kind of, yeah, it's like, oh, like I just want to get laid, or it's easier to get laid in this lifestyle, or I don't want to commit, so therefore I'm going to be polyamorous. These are more superficial reasons for doing it, I think. It's not less valid a reason, but it's just, I mean, to feel polyamorous in your heart is just kind of feel like an openness and an expansiveness, a desire to connect romantically with more than one person.
I mean, I think there is, even if that is a superficial reason, and it definitely sounds like it is, I think that dating in general, there is always a level of superficialness that should just be accepted, right? Because I think that whether you are gay, straight, poly, whatever, right? Everybody should be entitled to like whatever they like and not like whatever they like without judgment.
I agree. Yeah, and I love that about your show. It's just like no judgment, all sexualities and genders and preferences.
I mean, I've had a lot of growth since starting this show. I think a couple of years ago, had you asked me certain questions about sexuality, I might have completely different answers. But through the process of working on this and studying and learning, because I don't want to just be pervy and just, oh, dicks and vaginas, like I think that there's a way to express myself intelligently, articulately, throw a couple jokes in there, but educate people all at the same time. So that's the goal. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
What did you learn about yourself during the process of making this film?
debt, it is very challenging to, play so many roles while making a film, because I was a writer, co-director, producer, and star.
Oh shit. Okay.
But I learned that there are certain things, like decisions that had to be made, where there were conflicts between me and my collaborators, where at times I think I gave in, like I caved to someone else's feeling or opinion about something, where in retrospect I felt like I should have trusted my gut. So learning to trust my intuition more. And I mean, there's like, what did I learn about the filmmaking process, but also what did I learn about the subject matter? Do you want to know more about the filmmaking or more about what I learned about relationships?
What you learned about relationships? Because I
Okay.
mean, we are definitely a show that is themed
Yeah.
towards sex, sexuality, and relationships. So
Yes. It's interesting because the end, I don't want to give away the end of the film, but where Veronica ends up at the end is kind of like where I am now. So it's almost like
life imitates art.
Yes.
Ooh.
I find that happens a lot with what I create.
Okay. Then you got to create different things, so that way
sometimes
you
it's the
speak it
opposite.
through, you speak life into existence through your art. Right. So that means you get to write whatever story you want. You can write an open-ended story where there's growth and development. You can write a not so happy ending. You can write yourself a happy ever after. You have a choice. But if whatever you write for yourself, if you feel like if your creative process ends up panning out in your life, then you got to write a different, because once you put it to paper, it physically transforms.
But I think since a lot of my work is autobiographical, inspired by my experience in some way, I do learn a lot about myself through the creative process, and it can be therapeutic, like just a way to process experience, and to have a better understanding of the past or choices that I've made in relationships, and to maybe approach them differently.
Okay, you spoke about choices that you made in relationships, and then earlier we spoke about compromise. So one thing that I've kind of learned in life, and I teach this to my children, right? The art of negotiation, because in life, especially when it comes down to the whole compromise thing, I feel like most people never get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. So everything has to be a negotiation with me.
Oh yeah, and that's a big part of non-monogamy and the negotiation process, right?
Yeah, because you negotiate with multiple people, multiple personalities, that have their own external things that they got going on.
Yeah, and then if you assume too much, that's when like problems can arise, right?
Absolutely, because even with when we spoke about like the don't ask, don't tell, right? That could just be detrimental, because sometimes if you leave people with just the thoughts that they have in their own head, oh my God, that is a recipe for disaster. If you just like they say they don't want to know, but then in their mind they're piecing it together, and they're probably going in the opposite direction of what the truth actually is.
Yeah.
And amplifying it, and just making it bigger than what it needs to be.
Yeah. And often we make up stories that are completely false and just make us feel a lot of negative feelings and anxiety, fear, torment. Yeah.
Got it. You got any new projects coming out?
Not coming out, but just working on a pilot series about this subject matter, like a lot of different characters practicing polyamory and non-monogamy in New York City.
New York City is definitely like a melting pot for that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a great subject for a series because of there are so many different configurations, so many different types of relationships that can occur in between characters over time. So.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree. I mean, plus people are always entertained by other people's drama.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself already sounds like something that I will watch, right?
Yeah.
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 So.
And then to learn like what not to do, maybe, because if everyone was doing it right in a movie or on a TV series, it would be boring, right?
That's how I feel about monogamy. I feel like if monogamy was really the way to go, there's a lot of people that are failing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that are, failing at it. So, I mean, it's not for everybody. I think, the fact that these sort of norms are being pushed on people. Listen, if it works for you, it works for you. But I don't think you should judge anyone if that doesn't work for them.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with monogamy. Like, I think it is a choice, but there are other choices. And that's what I think that's what I would like people to take away from the film is that, oh, there's not just one choice. Like, it's not just monogamy or lie and cheat. Like, there are other ways to have a relationship. Even in marriage, you can have an open marriage. You can be polyamorous. Like I was in my marriage.
That sounds tough.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to last forever.
I mean, but I feel like in life and dating roulette, as I like to call it, you could be in a completely monogamous relationship and it's not guaranteed to last forever, and you can be in a triad or a poly relationship and it not last forever. Yeah. Like, none of this is guaranteed.
Nothing lasts forever. We're all gonna die.
Death and taxes are the only things that we know we got to look forward to. Yeah. That's the only guarantees.
But we can live in the moment and we can be honest with ourselves and communicate honestly with others and then have less pain while we're alive, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, a lot of the pain that people, it's like self-inflicted because if you allow the thoughts in your head that you are creating to hurt you, then that's self-inflicted pain.
That's true. We do create a lot of our own suffering, but we also, like, I think the more honest we are with ourselves, and that's like Veronica's journey in the film, is that she learns how to be more honest with herself by the end, and yeah, and that's like the more honest we are with ourselves, and then the more satisfying relationships we can have with others. That's what I believe.
So last question, or last couple of questions before we wrap this up. So there was a scene in the movie where Veronica, I think she was talking with Daniel. They were sitting in the park and she said that she was in a monogamous relationship once. It ended, and then after that she chose to just choose a different lifestyle. Do you think that is rooted around trauma from that monogamous relationship that she had, and she just used this lifestyle as just like a way to protect herself? It's just like, you know what, I can't get hurt anymore if I control the narrative, so I'm going to live in a narrative that I can control constantly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it, and it's more subconscious. Like, she's not fully aware of that. at that moment in the film, in the story. But yeah, I think that is definitely part of it. And also some relationships, I mean, that was her first love. So, I mean, it just, when you're first love, all you want is to be with that person, right? You
Right.
don't want to be with anyone else. And so it's also like the romanticism of that. She also is a romantic, right? I mean, there's a line where she says, if I can, like, there's no such thing as the one, if I can
Find
find,
a piece of
yeah,
the one.
yes.
When I heard that, I said, she makes this, she is romanticizing the shit out of this
Yeah.
poly lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like, sounds real nice.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is kind of a myth, the one. Like, because even if you're monogamous, most people are not with the same person for their entire life. So does that, like, let's say you have three
Some people
serious,
believe you get 3.
yeah, 3 serious relationships. Does that mean that only one of them is the one and the others don't count? Like, I've always been bewildered by this concept of the one. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've heard it spun different ways. I've heard that you get 3 great loves in your life, and depending on the chapter that you're in your life, that's when you find them, or you could find them back to back from each other. I think you won't really know until you know yourself.
Yeah.
Because knowing yourself helps you figure out because you could love somebody and they be completely no good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I always think that how you know is the heart always wants what it wants, even when it's no good for you. I think how you know when a relationship is truly meant for you, or if you have the one,
right,
would be if you can get your heart and your mind on the same accord, which means that not only do you love this person, but everything about being with this person makes sense, like logically, because love is not a logical emotion. Right. It will put you in places and situations and with people that you don't need to be just based off of how you feel. But when you can get your heart and your mind on the same accord, then I feel like that's how you really determine.
Yeah, it's like, does this person fulfill me physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, like all the different levels, all like aspects of human experience.
Yeah.
And if you could find someone that you feel aligned with in most of those areas, then that could be a beautiful relationship.
Absolutely. And then with that, right, you might find the person who is also open to different experiences, because you realize that based on the alignment of your mind and your heart being in sync, that y'all both don't have a problem exploring different territories together.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely what what I look for usually. Just at least someone who's open.
Yeah, openness is important.
Yeah.
Because anyone who is willing to judge you in any capacity is not someone that you want to have in your space.
Right. Yeah.
So we're about to wrap this thing up real quick. Where can the audience find the film?
You can watch it on any number of VOD platforms: Amazon, Apple TV, Vudu, Tubi, Google Play. You just go to lesslifelove.com. There's a link there to all of those platforms, and the trailer's on YouTube. And you can find me on Instagram at _Stephanie Sellars. And yeah.
I will make sure I put all of that stuff up on my platform, so that way everybody can get in contact with it. Any last words, remarks before we close this thing out?
It was a really great conversation, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. And it's always interesting to talk about, because this film because it inspires like no conversation is the same. So
Okay.
it's always enjoyable for me. Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. I mean, I definitely consider this more like a conversation than an interview.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on. I hope that if you have any new projects coming out in the future, you come back and join me so we can chop it up some more. Or if I decide I want to do it, because I mean, I definitely want to dive a little bit more into this subject matter. And like I said, because I know I am not fully qualified to take on this subject matter solely by myself, I definitely want to make sure that I have people on when I do discuss it who have lived the lifestyle. Because I mean, I think there's a difference between uh, me being a man who may have had a few threesomes versus someone who's living the lifestyle. Because this is relationship based. This is not, something that is based in just fun and entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's definitely, I know, one of the myths attached to people just think, it's like it's a free for all and people are just being reckless and they want to say you a sinner and all type of wild. But listen, I don't got time for that. Life is too short for boring sex, people. Remember
Agreed. Yeah.
that. Check it out on all the different platforms. Thank you, Stephanie, for coming and joining me on the show. And as I always like to end this thing, either you can live or be living. They're two different things. It's your choice. Check me out, Uptown After Dark.